What you call that noise?
The XTC Podcast.
XTClimelight.com.
What do you call that noise?
What do you call that noise?
He is a man who played toy soldiers with Andy Partridge, who gave XTC's demo tape to Radio 1 DJ John Peel, and who encouraged Colin Moulding to write songs. His name is Steve Warren, and he is our guest on this episode of What Do You Call That Noise? The XTC Podcast. Hi there, I'm Mark Fisher, and I recently had a trip to Swindon. Seeing as I had work to do nearby, I took the opportunity to catch up with Steve, who was XTC's roadie and drum tech, in his living room, where he had a fascinating conversation about XTC's early days. Joining us was Gaz Barrett, who told us all about the splendid mural of English settlement he has commissioned on the side of a house in the centre of Swindon. And if you'd like to see what that looks like, just check out XTClimelight.com for pictures. But before we get to that, every episode you hear this tune.
What do you call that noise? Like nothing that we've heard before.
That's the sound of Gary Perkins singing What Do You Call That Noise? And this time, Gary is back with another miniature masterpiece for our series in which we hear songs you have written that have been inspired in some way by XTC. So here is Gary to tell us all about it.
What do you call that noise?
Hello, Mark, and all fellow XTC fans. This is Gary Perkins from Nottingham in England. My own XTC journey started, I suppose, with Black Sea. I was 25 and newly married. By the time of Apple Venus, 20 years later, I was still married. But by that time, I got 3 children and a mortgage. So all the albums along the way bring back really good memories of different stages in your life, like a soundtrack to your life. And that's what I wanted to reflect in my song, XTC on the Radio. Also wanted to recall those pre-internet days when you didn't have instant access to any song at any time of day. So it was a genuine thrill when you got to hear XTC when they came up on the radio, when you caught them on television. Got fond memories of Neon Shuffle, I think, on Whistle Test, maybe Yacht Dance on Whistle Test as well. And I distinctly remember watching Mayor of Simpleton on MTV on a pub TV screen sometime. I recorded my track, XTC on the Radio, in what I call Studio 2. It's in reality the spare bedroom. And I recorded it on my battered old Tascam 8-track digital recorder. For Terry Chambers on drums, I had to rely on my second-hand Yamaha keyboard, so apologies to Terry. I do hope you like the track. It's called XTC on the Radio. It's by Gary Perkins. Cheers.
From white music to the Black Sea, the Mayor of Simpleton on MTV. Everywhere I went, everything I did, every place I go, I had XTC on my radio. I had XTC on my radio, yeah. From the first kiss to the wedding day, every single hit and miss along the way, every twist and turn, every lesson learned, every high and low, I had XTC on my radio. I had XTC on my radio. Dancing yachts and Sergeant Rock, pretty girls down by the sea. This is Papa 25 o'clock, and I've got Mr. Partridge in a pear tree. I got Mr. Partridge in a pear tree. Yeah. From student days to middle age, fall back the corner on every page.
What do you call that noise?
That's a mighty fine radio you've got there, Gary. If you'd like to hear more of this kind of thing, check out Gary Perkins on SoundCloud, and I'll include a link in the podcast blurb. If you have an XTC-inspired song yourself, feel free to let me know at mark@xtclimelight.com, although I have to say there is a very long waiting list ahead of you, I'm afraid. Another hip, hip hooray for the brilliant supporters on Patreon who make this podcast happen. They are all, as you know, very, very wonderful people. And if you like what you hear and you'd like to join them, it's very, very straightforward. You just pop over to patreon.com/Mark Fisher and decide on your level of support. There are 3 levels, and if you opt to be a knight in shining karma, I'll read out your name at the end of each episode. And my regular reminder, you can buy your copy of What Do You Call That Noise? An XTC Discovery book at xtclimelight.com, where you'll also find details of all of these podcasts. So now it's time to go to Swindon for a chat with Gaz Barrett and Steve Warren.
What do you call that noise?
So here we are in Swindon, in the house of Steve Warren and a very giggly Gaz Barrett.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome to my house.
Great to be here, not least because I've been doing an awful lot of podcasts, but partly because we started during this, the beginning of the lockdown. Nearly everything I've done has been on a screen, it's been done over Zoom. So to be with flesh and blood human beings is very nice. Before we move on to Steve, I thought I'd like to introduce Gaz Barrett, because Gaz has just been showing me, in fact, the mural that he commissioned that's on a wall in Swindon, and it's of English settlement, the front cover is English settlement, which seems like an extraordinary thing for anybody to do, to commission a mural. Gaz, tell us how did it happen?
Well, as everybody knows, Dana, the artist, had done Drums and Wires last year in a great location, but only no cars will pass it, only people on foot. So I thought...
And I didn't understand, was that because you were telling me that before, when the fact that no cars go by it, is that because of recent traffic changes? Was there a point when cars did go by it?
Not really. I mean... Years ago they were going down there, but it's because with the regeneration of Swindon's new bus station and new buildings, they're putting up hoardings, and the council actually commissioned Dana and other artists to do some paintings on them. There's a Railway Works one, Swindon Town one, and Dana picked XTC. So the council actually paid for the paintings to be done. So
Dana knew about XTC and knew about Drums and Wires to do that in the first place?
He knew vaguely about XTC. He's a lot younger than us. But he did know them, and he thought that would be a good choice to pick. So he picked... I think they had 3 rounds. The artists, they had a sort of a brief they had to stick to. Mm-hmm. But overall, speaking to him, he could basically choose what he wanted, and he chose XTC. So
then you became a patron of the arts.
Well, so when that was in the news, I managed to find him on Instagram, and I just messaged him because, and I've been speaking to the council as well. These are only temporary hoardings. When they finish doing the building work, these will come down. And I have spoken to the council a few times, and they said they want to pick a couple of the best ones and put them somewhere in Swindon. But until that happens, anybody who lives in Swindon now, you just got to take a pinch of salt what Swindon Council say. Yeah. Dana said if they don't do anything with it, I can have it and put it in my back garden. But hopefully, and again, if people come to Swindon, there's an outlet village and Steam. I would like the best ones be displayed in there. Mm-hmm. And hopefully Swindon Council will do that.
Yeah, yeah.
So
because it is a question that a lot of people ask, because there was the famous mural with Diana Dawes and XTC, including Barry Andrews, and that's gone a long time ago, hasn't it?
Yeah, that was up at Old Town on some gable end of somebody's house, and again, I might be wrong, but I think it got damp proof had to get damp proofed, and they chose then to pebble dash it. I mean, it might have been gone since 1990, I think. That's virtually up the top of the town. Everybody knows Swindon, near the Vic and near where the BBC radio studios is. So yeah, back to your question. So yeah, as soon as I found Dana on Instagram, we just started chatting and exchanging messages, and I said, well, as that's only temporary, I'd like a permanent, which is what my main goal was, is to get a permanent XTC mural, and also in a better location where a lot of traffic, be it on foot or cars, would pass. So he found a couple of walls, and then around Swindon, then he went and looked at them and said, no, too much work, the wall wasn't very good. And just sometime me and the missus was in town, and we were just walking down Crombie Street, where the mural is, and there was so much graffiti. And I said, wouldn't it be great to, cover that up with an XTC mural? So knocked on a couple of doors, no answer. And then further on down near the end of the road, we knocked on this house, and a gentleman in there called Tony invited us in, kept us in there for an hour and a half, milky coffee, cake, biscuits. So friendly for somebody you don't know. And I, gave him my suggestion, and he said, okay. He's got a wall of about 5 foot by, say, 30 foot long, and I only wanted like 5 foot by 10 foot. And he said, well, you can have that bit of wall if you pay for me to have turtles and stingrays on the rest of it.
So that natural English settlement and turtle combination came about.
That's it, yes. Then it just took time. I just said, well, I'll go away. I'll contact you in a couple of weeks. I don't want to force it on you. I want you to, have a good think about it. And then, he contacted me a couple of weeks later and said, yeah, that's great, as long as you're happy to do the turtles and stingrays as well. Then I contacted Dana, and he went and looked at the wall and said, yeah, that's great. And then it was just a case of waiting for the weather. I think this was back in February or something, when it first sort of started to take fruition. And we just had to wait for a dry day. And I stayed there while Dana did it, and because the English settlement took 2 days, so I stayed and filmed it, and you can see that on YouTube of highlights. And then his friend Peter, who works with him, who does spray paint, Dana does paint as brush paint, and Peter does spray paint, and Peter did the stingrays and turtles.
And have you had feedback from it, people commenting on it?
Well, when we were doing it, the amount of cars that passed, hundreds, and so many tooted, or put their hand out the window, put thumbs up. We had people passing, taking pictures, and I think, I'm not really on Facebook, but I think even while we were there, somebody took a picture and posted it on one of the XTC Facebook pages, and within sort of half a day, it had like 15 or 2,000 likes or whatever, even before we'd even finished the first day. Since then, I have got via sources that a few of the band members, Terry and Dave and Colin, Colin messaged me personally and, said how much they liked it. I haven't heard from Andy yet, but Colin, Dave and Terry have put thumbs up.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. I mean, Swindon's got that tradition of murals, and to be able to keep that up is fantastic, but also just in any town, to change the look of the built environment is special for people, isn't it? It makes a landmark that wasn't there before in a fairly ordinary street otherwise. Yes,
fairly ordinary street, and anybody it's probably happening all over UK. The graffiti on walls is pretty bad, and especially in Swindon. So this covered up a little bit of graffiti, and a lot of houses in Swindon are getting some sort of painting on their walls to cover up graffiti, and fingers crossed it normally stops people graffitiing over them. I'm not saying all the time, but I think people who do graffiti do have respect for artists who do something on a wall, and so they do leave it alone. And as you said, we've just been down there, and what's that? I don't know, I'm trying to think now, 3 months on.
Yes, perfect.
And it's still perfect.
Yeah. I'm just thinking if there's a rival band, fans of U2 or something, we could go around and scroll their whole album cover on top of it.
Well, I suppose beating Swindon, is it Supertramp and Justin Hayward and Gilbert O'Sullivan. Maybe it would be nice if somebody commissioned one of their album covers.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get the whole set.
Yeah. So, it would be nice. But, as you probably saw walking through Swindon, there is a lot of great paintings on wall that people have covered up graffiti. I have no regrets doing it. It's been a year-long project, shall we say, and I'm very pleased with the outcome. I didn't pick which one to do. I gave free rein to Dana to pick which one he wanted to do. I think he's done a great job.
Yeah, he has. Yeah. And we were saying before, fingers crossed, it'll still be there when the next convention happens, so people will be able to do a walking tour and catch up with it, and maybe even the Drums and Wires one as well if they while they're in town.
Yeah, well, quite a few people have messaged me and said how long is it going to be there, and you can laugh. I never asked the owner of the house how long is it going to stay there, and as we were talking earlier, I said if it can stay there till next year's convention and anybody attending that convention can go and have a picture taken, it would make my day, so I would be happy if it lasts to there. Anything after that to me would be a bonus. Obviously, hopefully it lasts there quite a few more years, but if it's still there when the convention is on, then it's been worth all the hassle and cost and stress and whatever.
Yeah, well done. That's great entrepreneurial work. It's good to see the city changing. Let's come over to Steve and Gaz. Feel free to chip in your old questions here, but Steve, you're one of these rare people who not only worked with the band but actually knew the band from very, very early on. You, if I'm remembering rightly, you were at school with Andy, or you're actually living on the same estate as Andy Partridge.
We lived opposite each other. Southwick Avenue and Penn Hill. From when he was between 10 and 12, we moved up to there, and then from that moment onwards, we were friends, and we used to hang out every single day. We'd watch him drawing, or he's still into little soldiers.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a rockery in his garden, and he used to sort of put all these soldiers in his rockery, and we'd have a telescope, and we'd pretend there was a war going on, Yeah. But
and were you into soldiers as well?
I was not. I was into Scalextric sets. Andy happened to have a Scalextric set. And if we come on a bit further, I had an acoustic guitar, a semi-acoustic guitar called Eggman's semi-acoustic guitar, and I swapped my guitar to Andy, and he gave me a Scalextric set. So
that's an interesting development. That's
an interesting development. So Andy, because Andy was borrowing a guitar at the moment from this school, I think it was, and so me giving him my guitar, he was then free rein to learn all the sort of the sort of pop tunes of the time, the Monkees and the Beatles and that sort of stuff. So my guitar might have been the sort of impetus for him to sort of get into the music industry.
And if you had a guitar, were you into music at the time?
I was into music, yeah, but I was rubbish. My big old mitts were so bad. I couldn't make the chords. I could play an open chord, but as far as actual chords go, I was rubbish. So swapping guitar for this Scalextric set was ideal for me, And then Andy used to sort of Andy's father was a drummer, a jazz drummer, and at the end of our road was a place called the British Legion, and Andy used to go up there with his dad, and he'd go on guitar, and his dad on drums, and the guy on double bass, So
I didn't realise that. So Andy was actually playing with his dad.
Yeah, with his father. Yeah.
What sort of age was he doing that?
Oh, about 14 or 15, I suppose. Yeah, with his sort of Peter O'Tork haircut, Yeah.
And at that stage, was he any good at guitar at that point? At the age of 14,
he was. Yeah, Andy's always been a good guitarist. I mean, it's funny when Barry Andrews joined the band. When Dave joined the band, Andy took a back seat as far as guitar. Andy's into sort of block chords these days, and Dave took all over the fiddly bits, But before, when it was XTC with Barry, Andy's guitar playing was really, really amazing, And he could really solo with the good people,
I must. Next time I talk to Andy, I should talk more about his relationship with having a musical father, because I don't think I've ever heard him talking about his dad. I mean, I have talked about his dad, but not from the point of view of a musical influence. But
Andy's always sort of talked about his mother with her mental illness, and so his father don't sort of get a look in. But so his dad used to play quite a lot around Swindon. I said, especially at the British Legion. So, and then Andy would go up there and take the guitar up there and play along with him.
And what would they be playing? Jazz covers? Or?
Yeah, that sort of stuff. Sort of diddly. I haven't got a clue what sort of tune it was. But around that time, Andy also was in another band called Stray Blues, and they played at a place called McIlroy's Ballroom, which was the famous place in Swindon at the time for music, And I remember there was a guy on drums called Tony Clempson, I think his name was, and who had the loudest bass drum in Swindon. But Andy got up, and he sort of get up and play some sort of blues sort of stuff, like, you know. And then, but again, with his Peter Tork haircut, like, you know.
And did you have a sense, like, even at the age of when you first knew him at 11 or 12 or whatever, was he just another boy in the playground sort of thing, or was there something about...
Well, and his artistic work was always amazing. I mean, I said we'd sit on his porch right out on the street, and he'd always have a pen and pencil, you know, paper, and he'd be drawing things left, right, and centre, and you think, wow, that's it's so sort of futuristic and so amazing, like, you know. And we had a great friendship. We used to go to the cinema together and go on holiday together, and that sort of stuff. And this this pop documentary said he had no friends, but that might be a bit sort of tongue in cheek, being a sort of a star, like, you know.
Yeah.
He had a few friends in the Penhill estate, so I said I went on holiday with him quite a lot, and we always went to the cinema to see the Beatles, Yellow Submarine, The Help, Hard Day's Night, that sort of stuff, like, you know. So, and then we got into music together. I mean, we were, my first sort of outing with music was the Moody Blues on the Threshold of a Dream album, and we'd lay on my sort of on my lounge, and we'd listen to the music. We'd try to make fake stereo by taking a plug out of the speakers like this and try and get the sort of sound like that. And after that, me and Andy, we had our own radio station called Radio Anglo, and we used to record onto a little portable cassette player. Not cassette, a reel-to-reel machine.
Yeah.
And then we'd record sort of stuff, and then we'd hang the speaker out of my bedroom window in Southwick, and as people walked down from the bus stop in Penhill, we'd turn up the volume and blast out all these sort of tunes to them, like, and then they'd sort of, whoa! Yeah, so we had our little thing called Radio Anglo, like, and that was quite sort of fun. But we got through the first stereo thing that we ever heard, I think, me and Andy, was probably the Who Pinball Wizard. We had a 7-inch single of that, and it was in stereo. And my father actually made a valve amplifier for me. And
this,
so we hooked this and sort of downset sort of record deck up to this little amplifier, and then we heard the Pinball Wizard for the first time with the guitar at this song, and it comes in this, and we sort of, wow, this is a whole music, like, amazing. But and his artwork always was brilliant, and I've got a couple of examples over there of what Andy's idea of. He always wanted to be in the band, and some of the outfits he used to sort of imagine having these big sort of space glasses and wearing boiler suits and all this sort of stuff, and stacky old boots. Because Andy was into the New York Dolls then, and then he went through Captain Beefheart and all these sort of bands, like, you know.
And did you keep up with him musically? Did you?
Yeah. And then he got into jazz with Tony Williams' Lifetime. I mean, maybe that was influenced from his father, like, you know. But the Tony, and then he met a guy called Spud Taylor, who was a bit of a saxophone player down in away from Penhill, like, you know. And they used to sort of meet up quite a lot. And then he met Dave Cartner, who's the other guitarist in what was the Star Park. Yeah. And then they played sort of rock music, and sort of a bit like Deep Purple and Free, I suppose, was that sort of influence, yeah.
And what was your relationship with those bands? Were you going to see them? I
was always with them, you know. I turned up with them, like, you know, and try either on the bus, or I used to have a little moped in those days, and sort of turn up and be with them, like, you know. But I've actually got a recording of the Helium Kidz in Swindon with John Perkins, who just recently died, actually. Yeah. And they were, you know, it was Colin, Terry on drums, Andy on guitar, and John Perkins on keyboards, and they were rehearsing in a place called Jennings Street School. Do you know Jennings Street School? Yeah.
I went to school to Jennings Street.
You went to school there, did you? Oh, wow.
If I'd have known that, they probably were rehearsing when I went there, and I didn't know.
So I recorded it on a little portable reel-to-reel. It was only a little thing like this, but I got 3 or 4 tracks of XTC, the Helium Kidz rehearsing, like, you know.
And so your professional relationship with the band sort of happened by osmosis. You were just there hanging around.
Correct.
Yeah.
I used to be a DJ at a place called the Brunel Rooms in Swindon. I used to do a Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and a Friday night. Tuesday night was a rock night, and Wednesday night was a kids' night, sort of, and then Friday night was a soul night. And on Tuesday night, we used to have in the amphitheatre, we'd have a sort of rock audience with a round sort of dance, and then I'd introduce a band each week, and there'd be Dave Greger's band, you know, the Ale House, and Wheels was another Swindon band, and the Helium Kidz was one of the bands that I used to introduce, like, you know. And so one night I introduced the Helium Kidz, etc., and their driver sort of quit. And Andy said, well, we got a gig tomorrow in Oxford. Any chance you could drive for us, like, you know? And I said, well, okay, I'll do that. So, but by default, I was there at the time, and then, yeah, I started driving for the band. And also at this time, I was a mobile DJ. My disco was called Matt Black. And Andy used to be my roadie. He used to carry my gear. Yeah. So it started off a bit weird that, you know, he met Marianne at one of my gigs, like, you know. But he used to carry my gear in for me, and then years later I'm carrying his gear in for him, like, you know. So it was a bit weird, like, you know.
And what was the scene like at the time? Because it's you know there are bootlegs and stuff that probably many listeners will have heard of early Helium Kidz stuff, but how did all these different and Alehouse, you know, how did all of these bands fit in the scene? Was it a lively musical scene in Swindon at the time?
Swindon was awful for getting gigs. I mean, there was hardly any places you could play in Swindon at all. I mean, there was the Swindon College. There was a place out Robbourne. We sort of get a gig sometimes, like, you know, but you'd have to go out of Swindon to get gigs, like, you know. We played in Oxford and Reading and sort of places like that, and it was not a great music scene in Swindon, like, you know. I think if you asked Dave Gregory, he would probably say the same. Yeah. It was difficult to get a gig in Swindon anyway, because Swindon audiences were into that sort of music, like, you know.
And you as a DJ paying attention to music, it was a very fertile time for music, that sort of mid-70s period. You've got the sort of the old guard, the sort of 60s, and you've got the prog rock, but you've also then got the young upstarts about to break through in the punk scene. Did it feel exciting?
It was brilliant, because I used to play all sort of Status Quo and Deep Purple and Hawkwind, that sort of stuff in the amphitheatre. But then we discovered punk, and the first punk single I played was the Ramones, Blitzkrieg Bop, like, you know. And I thought I'd try it to see how it went down, like, you know. And there was a few people sort of got up and danced, and the second week there was a lot of people got up and danced, like, you know. So gradually I sort of introduced, and I used to go to Kempster's music shop in Swindon and buy all my punk sort of stuff, like, you know. And so I got more and more punk stuff, and I try and change the audience over from listening to Status Quo and to listen to the Ramones and the Damned and the Clash and that sort of stuff, and it went down really well, like, you know. So I was when obviously the Helium Kidz come on, that sort of night was really, really good, because everyone was into the Helium Kidz music and to the punk records, like, you know, so it was good.
And what was the status of the Helium Kidz in the scene, such as it was? Yeah, not very many places to have a gig, but, you know, they were around. Were they known on the scene? Were they the leading band, or did they have rivals?
Sometimes in the Brunel Rooms there'd be people with banners up at the back, you know, they're saying, you know, the Helium Kidz. My sort of favourite band, like, you know, and you think, oh well, you know, they're sort of starting to get a following in Swindon, like, you know, and it was really good to listen to the audience, you know, reaction, like, and they got more, and because I mean, apart from playing outside of Swindon, you get a gig at the Brunel Rooms probably once every couple of months if you're lucky. And so you built up a rapport with the audience, but it was always sort of long term sort of thing, like, you know. But yeah, there was more and more people would turn up, because the Brunel Rooms used to have 3 different rooms in it, and so most people were in the sort of the main room, and then we'd have the amphitheatre. But more and more people started filtering in and coming to see the Helium Kidz, like, you know.
Did most of the songs the Helium Kidz play end up on white music?
Yes.
So that's what they were touring mostly.
That's what they were touring, yeah. So then we got to rehearsing, and then we played London stupid amount of times. The Rochester Castle and the Hope and Anchor and the Fulham Greyhound, the Red Cow. And we was in London nearly every week. We were playing in London. And because Ian Reid, the manager, he had contacts with London. So he invited bands down to play at the Affair. It was called the Affair in Swindon. And then we'd get another booking in London on exchange of the sort of thing, like,
And did the Affair open in the middle of this process then? Was it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think it was a nightclub called Bubbles or something before, back in the day. Like, it was just a nightclub, like, but gradually it became more of a music venue, like, and we played there loads and loads of time. Well, loads of bands played it there. I mean, I think the Damned play there once, and the Clash and bands like that sort of like
the Affair.
Yeah, the Affair. Yeah, and Generation X was another band with Matey on vocals, like, But I said most of our focus was then going to London, and we'd done a demo tape. And we played upstairs at Ronnie Scott's, my second claim to fame. We played upstairs at Ronnie Scott's one night, and I was, mixing the band. John Peel came and stood next to me.
Amazing.
And we were chatting between between the sets, like, And he watched the gig, and then after, sort of at the end of the night, he said, "Oh, they were quite good, I said, "Do you want a cassette tape of our demos?" So I give him it was a green C90 cassette, and I give him the demo tapes, like, and a couple of weeks later, we got a phone call from the BBC saying, "Can you come do a session for us?" Like,
Brilliant. So
Whereas Andy said it was the management had sent this tape. The actual truth was, I was the guy who gave the tape to John Peel, like,
take that opportunity. Brilliant chance.
And if you could probably get into John Peel's estate, you could probably find my cassette with the writing on amongst his collection, like, So we then did the John Peel show, and then the more times we played London, there was people fighting to sign the band. Like, there was a Jonathan King's record label, Berserkly Records, and there was Virgin there, and EMI, and all these sort of people, like,
And just before that period, or was there a point when you suddenly realised this wasn't just a few lads mucking around? These people are taking themselves seriously. Were they always professionally minded, or did they become professionally minded?
But they become more and more of a band, like, I used to think to myself, when we started, I thought, it might last a couple of weeks. When we started off, we had 3 mics. We had an H&H amplifier, 3 mics, and we just another pub band that are playing. But then once we got into London, that got more and more professional, like,
But even getting into London, that's pretty serious, isn't it?
Yeah. Especially for a band from Swindon, like, I'm not. I don't know if Dave's band Alehouse ever got to London. Don't think they did. But having that connection with Ian Reid, it was just the fact that we could swap different bands to come and play in Swindon and we play in London. It was.
And I suppose if you know that you're going to be on the stage following the Damned or before the Damned or whatever, you're going to have to up your game, aren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And the band got tighter and tighter and tighter. And Andy he was a prolific writer at that sort of time, and he was writing this "She's So Square" and "Hang On to the Night" and all these sort of stuff. And you think, well, and then they'd introduce this new song into the thing, and then people would go crazy in London. It was great times, like, really, really good times.
Is that right? The audience reaction was good.
It was really, really good. When we used to play the Red Lion in Hammersmith, really low ceiling, and then there was a pogo in those days, obviously, and people jumping up and hitting their heads on the ceiling. And it was so hot in these places, and then the water was running off the ceiling, like,
raining
it was
inside.
Great. But one other weird thing was we played the Fulham Greyhound, and of all people in the world, Pat Travers was in the audience, and he went backstage and met Andy, and he asked Andy if he'd join the Pat Travers band as a guitarist. And of course, Andy turned it down, and then the best of the band was sort of looking and thinking, is he going to leave us? Like, no. Pat Travers tried to get Andy to join the Pat Travers band. So
amazing. And I imagine, just because of that scene, because everybody was watching everybody else, I imagine within the audience there would have been a lot of people who would then be in bands themselves.
Yeah.
They become famous.
Well, I was reading my diary just now, and people like John Fox from Ultravox and the keyboard player from Ultravox, they used to turn up in the High Wycombe and their sort of people. But there was always, once we started playing London, the word got around, and there was always music journalists and people from EMI or people from Virgin or whatever. And then, but the sort of day before the signing, we were in the Fulham Greyhound, and there were, I think, Jonathan King and the Virgin people were in the back of the room arguing about who's going to sign, like, you know. Yeah. And Virgin won, obviously, like, you know. Yeah. And so we had that whole signing thing in Swindon at the Affair, like, you know.
I read something that like in the very early incarnation of Scritti Politti, I think the Scritti Politti Green Guard side and people would go, his band would go and check XTC out, and I bet there was loads of people on that sort of level, people who were about to be really big in the 1980 or 1979 were around checking everybody out.
I think some of the members of Squeeze used to turn up as well, like, you know. But there was we'd always have this sort of thing. You look on the dressing room wall and think who was here last week, and then you'd always see the same the same names and same people. And then you'd think, oh, they was there this week, and they were there this week, and it was great to see the people who turned up at our shows. Like, you know, it got more and more and more popular and more popular as we went on. Like, you know, but London was the look for XTC. I think London, and then meeting John Peel, and then doing that whole radio show, but then we got signed by Virgin. And then we got the first sort of really good PA system, and then we went into the studio, did the album, and then toured the world, like, you know.
And how loyal was the Swindon audience at that time? As you built up a London audience, did Swindon care?
Swindon was still... They always held back. Swindon was not a good place. Never was. Andy always said it was like playing to a dead audience, almost, like, you know. There was hardly any feedback at all from Swindon audiences, like, you know. When we played the Oasis, even though it was probably sold out, it was like, rather than sort of being rapturous like it was in London, but everyone going crazy, and because I don't think the whole pogoing scene was in Swindon, like, you know, and the whole punk with the razor blades and then the black, you know, the bin bags and the whole lot. And I think if you'd have worn that around Swindon, you would have been looked at and thought, well, who's that weird person, like, you know?
And what was at this stage, what was your working day like? Because you've got to get from Swindon to London, you've got to do the gig, you've got to get... How exhausting was it? How full was your day?
It was crazy. I mean, I get a phone message from me and Reed and saying, we got to be at the BBC tomorrow and Maida Vale Studios for doing this session. And I thought, oh, okay. So I'd have to take the van, which was a Mercedes van with all the gear, and then on my own get the gear from the van down the steps into the BBC Maida Vale Studios and set all the stuff up before Ian Reid would bring the bands into London, like, you know. But so I got a diary here showing the gigs we played. For the stupid amounts of money we played for, like £10 and £12 and 15. But XTC used to play for £12, like, you know. And you think, when you look at it now, you think, how could we have ever, toured with a £12 budget, like, you know? Yeah. It's stupid.
And what was your financial relationship with the band? Were you employed by them?
I was employed by Ian Reid. Alidor Limited. Alidor and the 40 Thieves. It was Ian Reid and Dennis Deathridge was the other guy, like, you know. And so I was on some sort of wage, but, you know, it was rubbish wage, and we'd get and until later on we get a per diem, you know, for expenses each day for getting food, etc. But yeah, I was the jack of all trades. I had to do everything, like, you know. And then
and I imagine late nights.
4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. We played one day. We played in Wales, a place called Llandrydnog, Wales. We played with Johnny Thunder and the Heartbreakers. And we went to put the gear in the van, and we found that we had a flat tyre. And so we had to drive, with all the gear and the band in there, we had to drive at 5 miles an hour till 20 miles to the nearest place that had a air vent, like, you know. And so that was some things we used to do. And when we were playing in Cheltenham, in the winter, you go around these sort of bends, and the car, the van would suddenly sort of start aquaplaning on the ice, like, and it was my job to try and keep the band alive and try and get them home, like, in one piece, like,
And you just mentioned the pogoing thing, but the other thing punk audiences were notorious for doing was spitting.
Yeah.
It must have been disgusting, was it?
It was shocking, because the trouble with Andy is he's completely short-sighted, so he'd be singing away like crazy, and all this spit was coming onto the stage, and quite a few of my cassettes I've got, they're saying to the audience, for God's sake, stop spitting, we don't need that sort of stuff. And it must have been horrible to have been spat on by people all the time, like,
And you must have been ill all the time, about you.
And apart from the fact that you're probably going, if they got some sort of illness, they're going to pass it on to you, like, And then, another place we played was we were late to get to a gig in Dundee. We went from Swindon to Newcastle, and we broke down, and we got to Dundee University 3 hours late, and we got onto the stage, and then all the audience were completely paralytic by that sort of time. And in those days, they had this 10-inch spear, and they used to sort of pick up the top and then throw it at the band. And Andy and we were sort of trying to dodge these beer cans coming onto the stage, like, mad audience, crazy, a great audience. Scotland was always really good for us, like, really good for us.
And did it ever feel dangerous during the punk wars?
The only danger I ever felt with the band was we played in Belfast at the height of the sort of troubles. We played the place called the Pound Club in Belfast, and about 100 yards down the road, a bomb had gone off, like, And then you think to yourself, what are we doing in Belfast playing, like,
But that wasn't the audience. That was just that was the political atmosphere at the time.
Yeah, political atmosphere. Yeah. But no, I don't think there was any. Some drunken people used to try and get hold of the PA, and then we'd just put it on tables, and they'd be sort of rocking the PA, and I'd be running from my mixing desk then to trying to hold on to this PA before it fell to the ground, like,
And while I'm thinking of it, Colin always attributes you as the person who suggested to him that he should start writing.
That's correct, yeah. Another claim to fame, right?
Yeah. John Peel and Colin Moulding, none of the songs of Colin Moulding, none of the songs of XTC without you.
Well, that's right. Colin was, he just sort of held back and let Andy do all the work, like, And I said to Colin one night in the dressing room, I said, you ain't going to get much royalties if you just sort of sit back and let Andy do all the writing, like, You want to get up and start making your own songs, like, And then you can then get the royalties, and then you make yourself a few bob, like, So he said, okay, Steve, I'll do that then. And then, of course, he started, and then all the sort of pop, wonderful songs come out, and it was brilliant, like,
Yeah. I'm just, because Dance Band, it was his, wasn't it, on 3DP?
Yeah,
I guess that was one of his earliest.
I used to love Dance Band. Colin used to sort of shout out as he was singing it, and he'd see me at the back of the audience bouncing up and down. He said, "Steve Warren's in a dance band." Some of the quips between songs that Andy used to come up with were stunning. And like he'd say to the audience, "Don't get too close. I don't want to sort of start off a population explosion," and that sort of stuff. Like, and Cuba, living from Cuba, was always a great song, and Andy would sort of go on about the different wars that were going on at the time. Like, Andy was quite political, I think, and some of the sort of stuff he'd come up with,
particularly around that time.
Yeah. But when we got bigger and bigger and bigger tour wise, and we played obviously with the Police and UB40 and Talking Heads and Blondie and loads of bands, and especially the Police. We toured with them around the States for 2 or 3 months. Then we toured down the south of France with the Police, with UB40 and the Beat, and that was a fantastic night. Like,
And you were just mucking in with everybody. It was all part. You were all part of the gang.
Part of the gang, yeah. And I started recording the band live because Andy wanted to know what it was like to hear. He'd listen to my tape and he'd say, he'd get some ideas whether it was good or bad, what was working, what was not working. So that's why I sort of carried on recording the band.
Yeah.
But that's why I've got all these unreleased live recordings straight off the desk of the band.
And from a mixing point of view and from a recording point of view, I know the band got very, very loud, and there was a sort of battle of volume. Was that a problem from
That was a problem, especially with Colin. Colin's bass guitar, because he used to put his bass right next to Terry's kit, and everything would bleed from Colin's bass to the kit, like, you know. And sometimes you'd have to almost turn the bass off on the PA because it was so loud on stage. And I used to say to them, you know, let me do the mix, because you're... But no, they wouldn't have that, like, you know, it'd be crank it up, like, you know.
And there was I don't know where the fact came from, or if it was a fact, but wasn't there at one point that XTC were described as like the loudest band in the country?
Correct, yeah.
And was it true?
But we were, we had the 20,000 watt PA, like, you know, and then we were loud, but it was mostly bass and drums, because that's I loved the reggae, so I mean I used to mix and then put all the sort of the bass and the drums up in the mix, like, you know, and then the vocals on top of that, like, you know. That's why I used to love doing Scissor Man, because I used to have all the guitars and everything was panning across the speakers, and it was echo here, echo there, and then that sort of stuff, like, you know. It was. I used to love.
There were a couple of dubby songs, Battery Brides being one of them, and you've mentioned Living Through Another Cuba, where they would just give themselves a bit of time and sort of relax into it and just get hypnotic, I suppose.
I got a recording of Andy in Canada. Terry's idea was get him down, which means recording, so we can get him down, like, you know. So Terry was always impatient, but Andy, on a complicated game, he'd spend sometimes on the tour, he'd spend 5 minutes building up the sort of the tension, and he'd be going tin, 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 and then he'd start whistling, and then Terry was sort of back twiddling the sort of sticks and wondering what's going on, and it'd take like 5 minutes before I asked myself, should I put this in? And then it'd build up, and then all of a sudden it'd be whoosh, you know, and it'd go into it, like, you know. And live XTC were one of the bands on the tour, I think. We were great live. We were really good live.
And was there a point when they became great, you know, when they were quite merely good, and then suddenly you thought, oh no, these people...
I think it was probably just after Drums and Wires was released, and we went on that tour, and I thought I was proud of the band. Man. They were, you know, the backdrop they had was all this, and his Super 8 film was going in the background, and I thought this band are really, really good, and I was proud to be with them. I was proud to be their sound guy, like, you know, because I was friends with the police. Kim, he was the police engineer, and when we did all those gigs together, I learnt things off of Kim, and Kim used to talk to me quite a lot, like, you know. Touring with the police was brilliant. Like, they were such nice people, like, you know, really nice people. And when we played in Biarritz one night, and Stuart Copeland got food poisoning, and so he couldn't do the gig. They were going to it was probably 25,000-30,000 people at this outdoor gig, and so all the road crew of the police, the drummer, the guitarist, and bass player, they were perfect musicians. So the drum roadie, he borrowed Stuart Copeland's T-shirt and his hat.
And pretended to be him.
And he pretended to be him, and went on and did the whole set, like, you know, but nobody knew because he kept his sort of head down. And they had 3 encores, like, you know, with the drum tech, like, you know, rather than with the police. It was amazing.
Yeah.
That was in Biarritz. I was in France, like, you know.
And what you just mentioned about Terry... getting them down.
Yeah.
I was just thinking earlier, actually, one of the interesting things about XTC is that they enjoyed a pint, but as far as I know, apart from Barry Andrews, they went into the drugs.
No.
But what was the degree of excess? Was it were they more disciplined and work-minded, or was it a combination of fun and...
They hardly ever drunk. When we played America, in those days, it was everyone was on drugs left, right, and centre. Like, and you'd go into the back room, into the green room, and the promoter would say, "What do you want, then, boys? What do you want?" And Colin and Andy would say, "A pot of tea would be nice with some sandwiches and some water." They'd like, "What are you goddamn talking about? You know, what do you want?" no, we don't want any of that sort of stuff. So no, the drugs were never sort of in the sort of thing. The only sort of
because it wasn't like they were squeaky clean and being.
No, that's right. No,
but that just wasn't their scene.
The only time they got into some sort of stuff was in Amsterdam. Barry was got into the magic mushroom or something. Right. And apart from that, they were all. They'd have the odd glass of. Terry would like a drink when we were recording, but Terry has got this. He would never ever play a gig when he had a drink. You know, he would always the gig comes first, like you know, and then if they want to have a drink afterwards, okay. But
I seem to remember Dave telling me an anecdote about the one time Terry did have a drink, or he was either hungover or he was drunk or whatever, and it was just terrible when he he learned his lesson. I think
Barry was probably the. How should I word it? The bad boy of the band. Like, you know, he'd do things that the rest of them wouldn't. Like, you know? Dave was always. We played in Japan, and I think there was quite a few ladies in the rooms in Tokyo. But Dave, I think he had maybe a couple of people in his room, but he sort of sat them down, rung up the reception for a pot of tea and some sandwiches, and then restringed the guitar and sent them on their way, like, and the perfect gentleman that Dave is, like, you know?
Yeah.
It was a great touring with the band was fabulous, like, you know, but until Ian Reid got into the make more money, cut corners here, cut corners there, and it got really bad for me, like, you know, we'd turn up. Well, on the rider, there'd be sort of things like you'd have 6 or 7 people. Because, I mean, in those days, we had 3 Arctics. We had bloody, you know, light in one stuff, and the PA in another one, and the back line in another stuff. And so, to get that into the theatre, you need 5 or 6, 7 people to help you.
Yeah.
And sometimes we turned out, there'd be one guy there. Yeah. And so, I'd scratch around, and I'd see some people outside, and I'd either pay them out of my own pocket or give them tickets to come and see the show, like, you know. And Reid got to really cutting corners left, right, and centre. Yeah. And that was the that's why I left the band in the end, because we were due to go to America, and the band were going to go off in their hotels, and I was going to be given a 4'6" bunk and a coach. Yeah. And I'm 6'4", so I mean that would have been a disaster for me. Yeah, so I said that if I can't have the hotel the same as the band, so I mean I've been with them since day one, like, you know. And Ian Reid, no, you were. So
what was that? What year did you get out?
My last gig was the Lyceum in London in September 1980. I did the gig, packed the gear away. The band went to the hotel. We had a drink together. I went to my room. The band went to their room. I got up early in the morning, got the train back to Swindon, and then band flew off to America. And that was it. And I got a postcard from Al Clark, the Virgin guy. It was the lost sheep. And where are you, Steve? Where are you?
Well, there's a story there.
The band probably were told that Steve Warren was this bad guy, and
Yeah. Just to wind back a bit, being on the road. In even the best of circumstances, you know, if all of you had the most luxurious accommodation, blah blah blah, it's grueling, it's tough, it's whatever. And I've only really heard good positive stories about XTC on the road. Did they just have some magic that meant them we were getting on with each other all the time?
I think we'd been there and we'd done it, and we were like a band, a team, and everyone worked for everyone else, like, you know. And if you wanted something done, everyone would do it, like, you know. And if it come down to even picking the gear up and taking it out to the van, Terry would join in, and Dave would join in. We were a good team, and so even on the road, you'd have some bad nights, but we'd always wake up in the morning and say, "Oh, that was okay, actually," and then we go off to the next place. And when things used to go wrong, like the truck had overturned and all the gear got smashed to pieces, and we had to borrow people's gear and do a gig that night with this completely the wrong gear, like, you know, Marshall stacks. And Andy trying to get a sound out of this Marshall stack, like, and it was awful, and a rubbish drum kit, but we just carried on, and then we went to Canada, and the album had gone gold or platinum or something, and then I got given that gold disc up there, and that was when we felt, wow, the band are that good, like, you know, and the sound was good, the audience was good, everything was just perfect, like, you know.
And the band were a gang; they didn't fall out with each other; they were on each other's side. Correct.
Yeah. They were mates. I mean. And Andy was always a comedian. He'd always have some sort of quip for the day, and Terry and Andy they'd sort of talk to each other and then quip off each other, and it's always fun times in the van, like, you know. I mean, there was some stupidly long, well, there still is with Terry on tour now. There's some stupidly long drives, you know, from Nuremberg to going through the corridor into East Berlin, West Berlin, and get stuck there with the machine guns through the main door of the van, because we picked up. The band used to be so friendly; they'd pick up people on tour. People are complete strangers, and the band would say, "Oh, can I come in to your next gig?" "Oh yeah, no worries. Come in the van with us," like, you know. And we got to this, checkpoint like Checkpoint Charlie, and this guy he had no paperwork, and he had no papers and nothing. And we had all the sort of carnets and all the good stuff. But this guy got taken into this room, and they were coming out with mirrors under the van and the machine guns, and they're thinking, what the hell's name's going to happen here? Though? I mean, we can actually live tomorrow, like, you know. But we used to pick up wasting strays all over the place. They were terrible for that sort of stuff. But it was fun on the road. Until it got to the last probably year when I was taught, you know, the last year when it got to be really, really tedious with Reed's, you know, because Reed's obviously the money was going somewhere and he didn't know where it was going.
It wasn't going to you, obviously.
Well, exactly. And then the band were making money, but they never saw any of it, like, you know, and they couldn't. I mean, it was always like the hotels were okay, but they weren't comfortable hotels. I mean, some of them, when we played in New York, we stayed at the Iroquois Hotel, and it was cockroaches everywhere, like, you know, and you wake up in the middle of the night and walk into the bathroom, and it was like that in those days. Like, you got the cheapest sort of hotel. We played in Liverpool, and we didn't stay, but we were going to stay in a place called Cassin's Motel. And we got into we had a look at the room, and it was nylon sheets with stains on the bed and all this sort of stuff, and it was the cheapest sort of dive in the world, like, you know.
And in retrospect, I know this was after you left, but it seems to me like what you're describing is a sort of recipe for the state that Andy got into. Correct. 2 years later.
Yeah, that's right.
Maybe didn't surprise you when that happened.
We were known we had the thing called the Vasco da Gama award for the number of gigs we did in a year. I mean, if you look at some of XTC's touring years, we were playing everywhere and anywhere most of the year. Like, if we weren't on tour, we were in the studio. If we weren't in the studio, you were on Top of the Pops,
and somehow writing double albums worth of material. It was amazing.
How it all happened, it was just amazing. I mean, you'd be doing, you know, the Tiswas or the Old Grey Whistle Test or, you know, Top of the Pops or Saturday Morning Swap Shop, and all these sort of stuff, amongst everything else, like, you know, and you think to yourself, how did we ever do that, like, you know?
And you were involved in everything. You were all of those things.
Yeah. Top of the Pops and Whistle Test and all that sort of stuff, like, yeah.
And you were about 20 minutes ago, you were about to start talking about going into the studio for the first time. What was that like with White Music? And, you know, presumably that was the first experience of a professional studio working with them. Yeah, because
the band were very, very well rehearsed. Yeah. So whenever we went into the studio, it was 95% there already, like, you know. It was like, the album was more like a live set. It was, you know, obviously there was embellishments done and bits and pieces added, but the first two albums were like just a live set produced on record, like, you know. And I think it's once you got to Drums and Wires, and then you had more of a palette of music to be able to put overdubs left, right, and centre, like, you know. And of course, the producers got better and better and better and better, and then the studio got better. Like, we were in the townhouse, or we were in the manor, and the really, really good studios with really good engineers and really good producers, like, you know. And the band just picked up on it and loved it, like, you know.
Yeah. I mean, were you in recordings process? Were you around for the whole time? Or
Yeah.
No, just coming and going.
I'm afraid to say when you see the XTC at the Manor, as me with my white T-shirt bobbing around in the background, like, you know. And on top of that, we then commandeered the basement of the town hall in Swindon, and we had our own little recording studio there with our mixing desk and Red Brick Studios, and so we used to do all the demos for drums and wires down in that basement, like, you know. And we also used to rehearse in the affair during the daytime. We used to put the equipment on the dance floor, and I'd be down in the basement with the long extension lead, and then we record sort of stuff there, like, you know. But once we got into the sort of drums and wires album, and then English Settlement, and the equipment was brilliant, the sound was brilliant, and then we could, you know, rather than going from 12 tracks, we could go up to 24 or to 48 tracks, like, you know. And they used to use them. They'd use them.
And when I think back to the very, very short period of time, it seems to me, between white music and drums and wires, and certainly Black Sea, in terms of the artistry, I mean, I'm not saying anything against white music. I think it's great, but, you know, in terms of the artistry, there's a huge development in terms of the songcraft, the sophistication, like you say, the sounds that they were using. Did it seem surprising to you at the time, or did you just take it all in your stride as these developments happened?
When Dave came on board, Dave was a great guitarist. Like, Andy used to, you know, he knew, and he was above Andy's sort of status, really. And when the first time Dave came to the studio and to the rehearsal, I thought, wow, this is totally different. Like, you know, to be horrible to Barry, I hated his bloody piano. Because
it was very dominant.
His piano used to try and take that on tour. It was a joke for it. This upright piano, and when we used to play places like the Hope and Anchor, and the only place where you can get the piano into the Hope and Anchor was down a beer chute on two wooden things, and with a block and tackle, trying to drop this bloody great piano down there. And Barry's organ was always going out of tune or breaking, and so when Dave come along, and he just had this lovely amplifier and a guitar, and they think, Barry, it's lovely, great to know you. So another thing, Barry started playing saxophone.
Oh yes.
It was like a ruptured bee. I mean, the sound on stuff like New 10 Animal, Red, and that sort of stuff. I used to sort of, for God's sake, Barry, just shut the hell up, you know.
That added texture.
But he couldn't play saxophone to save his life, really. But he just blew into this instrument, and so apart from the saxophone, and apart from the piano, and apart from this horrible organ, they've come on board with this bloody lovely Fender combo. And they started playing, and he was just like a breath of fresh air. It was like a completely different switch around from this sort of attacking music, because Barry was live. He was always like on edge, like, you know, and he'd be rocking the piano backwards and forwards and going, you know, his veins were sticking out, and he'd be going crazy, like, you know. And Dave comes along, and he'd just be sort of playing brilliantly, like, you know. And it was just a total different sound, totally different thing, like, you know.
And possibly for Colin and Andy, that knowing that was the new palette that they could work with, maybe, I don't know, but maybe that was inspiration for them to move out into other directions, because they didn't think, oh, well, we've got to have, what's Barry going to be doing?
Yeah. Well, when you think of English Settlement, the songs like, you know, Down in the Cockpit, and all some of the songs are just completely a million miles from what Barry and the rest of the band were doing, like, you know. Yeah. I mean,
did you say you were still involved with English Settlement? Because
I wasn't involved in English Settlement. No, I left Drums and Wires with my last album.
Yeah.
I mean, you take stuff like I'm Bugged or Along the Watchtower with Barry and My Weapon and that sort of stuff, like, you know, and that's like a million miles removed from English Settlement and Drums and Wires.
And what did it feel like to you the first time you heard? I don't know. You can name the song "Making Plans for Nigel." Or "Complicated Game." Did it feel like, oh, we're moving forward here?
Yeah. Because the band used to be heard in the place called Tudor Studios in Swindon, and I sort of made up with the band at that time by English Settlement, and I used to go in and sit in and listen to the sort of demos, like, and I thought, wow, this is completely different. This is a whole new palette of things, and I wish I could have toured with the band, with their backdrop and the songs they were doing, like, but obviously I joined Mitsubishi at that time, and I had a full-time job,
Had a
the wife
job.
and the son, like,
Yeah.
So obviously that wasn't ever going to happen, like, But when I see the XTC on the Rock Palace gig, and I'm jealous that I was never there, like, to be the guy who did all the sound, because if you listen to all the bootlegs that are like before Drums and Wires, obviously it's me on the desk, so it's me. I'm the engineer on all those sort of things, like, and I'm on all the demos that were sent to London. I'm the engineer who did all the stuff on that as well, like, So I had some sort of part in XTC's success, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, well, no, you were there. There was obviously a part of it, and I was wondering, what did you get on with them all? Were there some who were one of them that was more your pal than the others, or because having started off with Andy Partridge as you were describing?
Well, I was Terry's drum tech.
Yeah.
So me and Terry, I always got on. Well, Dave gets on with everyone, and Colin, I think he gets on well with most people as well. But I was Terry's drum tech, so my job was to set up Terry's drum kit and then set up the PA and mic the stuff and then do the sound check, like, So probably I always got on with Terry and more than anyone. And then I'm still seeing Terry quite regularly now, like,
And it's always said that Terry seems to be the glue that holds the band together.
Yeah.
Even when the others have had tensions between them, he's always been the one to be the mediator.
I think so. I was at Terry's house a couple of days ago, and he said he'd been sort of chatting with, by email with Andy, and they've sort of still got that sort of bit of a rapport going, like, And I think if anyone would ever get the band back together, it would be Terry, I think. Not that he'd ever do that, but because, I don't think it'd ever happen.
And how do you rate Terry's playing as a drummer? Because I know back in the day when you were working with him, people would go to see XTC just to see Terry Chambers because he was such an extraordinary player.
He is a rock. He is so on the beat. My son's a drummer, and my son's a drum teacher, and he tries to do Terry's patterns, like, and he plays it well. But Terry live, once from the opening note to the last note, Terry is a machine.
Yeah,
he is so on the boat. Terry's never played with a click track, and you tell a lot of drummers these days to try and play without a click track and stay in time. It don't happen. Whereas Terry is just on the beat. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's a machine. He just goes on and on and on and on, and he's wonderful live, wonderful.
And did you see that even in Star Park and
always? Terry had this bloody great big white kit in those days, and he was a great technical. I don't know. He's not. You can't say he's technical drum because he's never been sort of taught, but he's always been the sort of the powerhouse behind the band. Him and Colin were a great. The glue that held the band together, like,
Yeah.
And they'd play and play and play and play. And Terry's a fun guy, when you get talking to him. He's very, very fun. He's from the old school, though. He still likes Deep Purple and all the sort of the rock bands of the sort of 70s. He loves Billy Cobham, who's a jazz guy. We used to play with John McLaughlin. Terry's a really, really talented drummer, and a lot of people on this tour in America, they were all coming up to Terry and saying, "Your drumming is just fantastic," like, And he's a great drummer. He's a really, really good.
And did
drummer.
You see that as well? Because you were mentioning the Police before and touring with the Beat and all these other people. What was the level of respect between the bands? Were XTC interested in the Police? Were the Police interested in XTC?
The Police would sound check with XTC songs.
Really?
And XTC would sound check with their Police songs, like,
I never knew that. That's amazing.
Yeah. So it was great. I mean, we got on so well with the Police. I mean, but UB40 were another band, and I think Terry had. It was picking up on some of that sort of reggae rhythms, like, And it's a shame Terry never got to play on later albums, though, because I think even though Pat Mastelana and all those sort of people were brilliant, Terry's input would have been so much, so amazing, I think.
Yeah.
And it's a shame that it didn't happen, like, you know?
Yeah.
Terry's, I love Terry, he's a great bloke.
And so even though you went to work for Mitsubishi, all the rest of it, you appear to have kept track of XTC's career afterwards.
Correct, yeah. I mean, I took Dave Gregory with his band Tin Spirits, I took them to Japan, and we played in the Mars Club in Tokyo. And then I took Terry, last year I went with Terry to Tokyo and Kyoto and back to Tokyo again with the band the XTC. So I'm still involved with them. And then a couple of dates, Terry asked me if I'd be the roadie again. So I did the Isle of Wight Pop Festival. I did a few shows around, driving them around. And so we're still very, very close, me and Terry. Dave is a good friend of mine still. And Colin, he's on the periphery. I mean, Colin does what Colin does, like, you know. And Andy, we occasionally meet, but it's not that often, like, you know.
You don't still play toy soldiers anymore.
No, I've got some gifts upstairs for Andy from the Japanese fans, like, you know. But that was
a bit like Terry having that 40-year hiatus between being a drummer and then not being a drummer again.
Yeah,
that's the same. Sounds like the same with you. You had a long time when you weren't doing anything, but then quite lovely to be able to come back to it again.
Yeah, it's when Terry asked me if I'd drive for him, and I thought to myself, oh yeah, this is going to be amazing, like, you know, and getting into a gig and putting all gear on stage and mixing and that sort of stuff. I thought, so, this wouldn't it be great? And Terry said to me, "Do you want to come to America?" And I thought to myself, "Oh no, I'm over 70. I'm 70 now, and to do that sort of tour, I don't think I could handle it now. I don't know how Terry's doing it now.
I don't, yeah.
He's a machine. He's still a machine. And Steve, the guitarist, and the new Terry, they've been around forever. I mean, to them touring is just a matter of fact, like, you know. But I don't think I've got the will and the strength to be able to get up and drive for 12, 14 hours to the next gig in America. I don't think I could do it.
But that EXTC tour, it just gets longer and longer. It started off with a few dates at the beginning of the year. I thought, oh, this looks quite nice. And then a few more in America, then a few more in the UK, then a few festivals. And, you know, it's almost like it was very, very close to what XTC used to do, isn't it?
Right, exactly. I mean, Terry, the XTC tour, I think, is going up till November now.
No, it's definitely December, because I told somebody about it for a December gig. Yeah.
He's picked up now on the tour with Hugh Cornwell.
That's right.
Because there was a band going to be playing with Hugh Cornwell in Frome, and then the band couldn't make it, so they asked XTC if they'd step in. And from that moment, I think Hugh got to realise that XTC were a good support band, and so it's grown and grown and grown. And I think if you look at the last 10 dates of this tour, it's Hugh Cornwell, like, you know. And there's talk of other stuff happening next year as well. So I don't want to mention what it might be, but yeah.
But it's great, isn't it? Yeah, and it's that's, after all, it's, I mean, even the fact that we're having this conversation feels weird. I mean, for me, having done a fanzine 40 years ago, here I am still talking about them. And Gaz being a reader of it.
Right. So what's your opinion on the XTC as a three-piece instead of a four-piece? Do you think they're better, tighter?
I saw what was going on between them as a four-piece. I saw what was going on in a couple of gigs, especially in London at the 100 Club. I saw there was tensions happening, like, you know. And so when Terry told me that they went to America, and then after 5 gigs, I think he left and then come back to Swindon. I think the band as a three-piece works. I mean, it would be good having another member, but trying to get another member who's going to be committed to XTC is going to be difficult.
And I saw them in Edinburgh not long ago, and I was really impressed. It was as good as I've seen them, and with only 3 of them, and it doesn't make any logical sense at all, but it just it felt, particularly because they were concentrating a lot of kind of Black Sea and drums and wires sort of stuff, so it sort of plays into the rock side of things pretty heavily, and Steve all of them are good enough musicians to be able to play these multiple roles. It's very, very impressive.
But from that night when the other Steve left until the next night, Steve had to learn how to be a lead singer from being a backing singer, and he had to learn how to do what to leave out and what to play on the guitar, And I think they took the songs, stripped it down to the bare knuckles, and then thought, this is how we can play this live. Terry had not even played on a lot of these songs before, but he put his little ideas into what this should be sounding like. And Steve, amazing to be a lead singer like that and to play the guitar. When you say No Thugs in Our House live, I mean, it's as good with a 3-piece as it would have been with a 4-piece, I think.
I find that Steve Hampton seems to put these little riffs in.
Yeah.
And they sort of stand out.
They stand out, yeah. Because they're leaving lots of holes where Dave would have been in there, or Steve Tilling would have been there. There's lots of holes. So suddenly Steve would get up and do a bit of stuff. You think, well, that's nice, or Terry had an extra little bit here and there. And the new Terry, he's been playing for years and years and years, and he's a good singer. And he's taken over a lot of what Steve Hampton had to do. Yeah. And he's now a good vocalist, and Steve's a good vocalist. And so I think as a 3-piece it works.
And I'm just thinking Gaz's question is really good addressed to you, because you could easily answer that question, oh no, it was much better in my day. I used to, and I would, probably all of us, probably Terry would say XTC were better than EXTC, but I don't think, I don't say that in an apologetic way. EXTC are great.
Yeah. They're totally different. The XTC Live were a great band, and there was some wonderful moments in the set, But EXTC are a stripped down version of XTC, and I think it works as a 3-piece. And if you haven't seen EXTC Live, go and be surprised, because the songs speak for themselves. When you got a band who can, start off with Terry on the drums, but when you got a band who are that talented as 3 musicians are, I think it just works. Yeah, you cannot knock what they're doing, I think.
And I think the other thing that, and I've found this for as long as when Steve Tilling was with them as well, that it feels like, and actually also TC and I, that what you hear is the XTC songbook, and you realise that Colin Moulding and Andy Partridge are fantastic songwriters, fantastic arrangers, and slightly out of context or in a different context, you then just think, no, these are just really, really good songs.
Yeah. And even people who've never heard XTC before or EXTC before, in America, they were coming out after the gigs and saying, wow, you were amazing. And I think the more and more times they go to America, I think that it will be brilliant for the band. The future is very, very far ahead, I think. They can play for years to come.
And just before we started, you were saying about how popular they still are in Japan.
Yeah.
Where you've been a few times.
15 times I've been there. 15 times. I went 3 times last year, but I was there 2 weeks ago. I was there, and the fans are all coming to the convention next year, and they're going to be. I won't spoil it. They're going to be doing some fun things.
Good.
But as I said, there's bands you wouldn't believe when you go to a gig and you see these Japanese bands, and halfway through the set they'll say, "Oh, we're going to play this XTC song now," and you think, "Oh, okay." And then they get up now singing Japanese, all these songs, and you think, "Oh, this is wonderful!" Yeah. The thing with Japanese people, once they latch onto a band, they stay with them forever, And XTC in Japan has always been loved, love them. In fact, my friend Akiko, she lives in the Yokohama area. She learned English by listening to XTC songs,
Really?
Yeah. So, and she was her and her friend Mika were the XTC fan club first members,
All right, yeah.
They set up the whole XTC. And I've been to Japan now, as I said, 15 times, but since 2015, I've been going to Japan to do conventions. And I'd get up and I'd play some of the XTC live stuff, but give them a few photographs and things of the band. But they turn up at these conventions. It's lovely to sort of see. And then But they asked me if I autograph some shirts for them, and I think, well, no, I'm just a sound guy. I'm not a member of the band. Oh no, we want you to sign this thing and sign that thing, and they are so generous with gifts, and they're wonderful people. The Japanese, wonderful people. It's a great country. If anyone haven't gone to Japan, you should go.
Yeah.
See, what drives me crazy on a personal note, being from Swindon, is that I lived in the railway village in the 70s, across the road from the Mechanics Institute, around the corner from the Brunel Rooms, around the corner from Julia Studios, and I never bumped into XTC. It just drives me crazy. I was always just like a couple of minutes walk away from all these venues, and it just drives me absolutely crazy to think.
It's not like it's a massive place either.
No, it just drives me to think that I was in this house and they could have just been across the road in the Mechanics Institute recording Rears and Murmur, or in the Brunel. And like you were talking, I used to go on the kiddie night on the Wednesday, and then when I got a bit older, I went on the Thursday, Friday night and Saturday night at the Brunel, and I probably missed XTC by one night or something like that. Just absolutely. And the only band I saw at Brunel Rooms was Orange Juice.
Not a bad band to see.
No, they were good, but I would rather it been to XTC.
On my visit, I've just been to Japan now. One of my friends introduced me to a band called Meta 5, META 5. And the album Meta Atom, she played me in the car, she played me this song. And the lead singer of Meta 5 was the guy from the Yellow Magic Orchestra.
All right, yeah.
And Andy apparently was friendly with this guy in the Yellow Magic Orchestra. And if you listen to some of the songs on that album, you can hear the influence of what Andy had given to this guy, And it's, if anyone wants to hear what XTC sounds like in Japan, sort of version of it, listen to Meta 5 album, and it's called Meta Atom.
Yeah.
So that was good to learn something completely new on this last visit,
Yeah, and also very gratifying for me as a fan to hear those stories, but also for you to have been involved in the band, to know that this was in a completely different country. It is the artistry and the creation is appreciated and it's as good as we think it is.
Yeah. I'm just stunned when you see these Japanese people trying to sing the songs in English to start with, but then they revert back to Japanese. But because obviously the L's and R's, there's a lot of those in XTC songs, and to try and sing them it's quite a big thing to do,
Yeah.
But as I said, go to a record store in Tokyo and look at the XTC section. It is huge. I mean, it always stuns me when I go there. And I send Gaz pictures from Japan of the XTC stuff that's on sale. Some of the stuff is stupidly expensive, but some of the stuff is good price. But you think to yourself, why is XTC revered so much in Japan?
Because they have good taste, obviously.
They have good taste, obviously.
You'll go down to Swindon, HMV, or previous record stores that used to be in Swindon, and you struggle to find an XTC CD or vinyl.
Yeah.
Other than obviously John Holmes, because that's Paul Holmes has got a good section now. Doing vinyl there.
Oh, that's a good tip. That's good to know. Yeah. I'm reluctantly going to bring an end to this podcast. It feels like we could talk all night, but it's been such a fascinating exploration, Steve. I'm very, very delighted to hear all of those stories, and thanks very much, Gaz, as well, for your contribution too. So it feels like I should be getting a round of applause to finish, but there is no round of applause. But at home, people can be clapping away. Thank you very much.
Obviously, there's a lot of stuff I can't talk about, because obviously what goes on the road stays on the road.
XTC there.
Thanks for having me.
Illicit. You're very welcome.
What do you call that noise?
Thanks again to Steve Warren and Gaz Barrett for such a great chat, and to Gary Perkins for bringing us XTC on the radio. If you've enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please pop along to patreon.com/Mark Fisher and show your support. Thanks in particular to the following Knights in Shining Karma: Terry Arnott, Kevin Burt, Lorenzo Ciacci, Cale Corbett, Liam Duggan, Jamie Dunn, Alison Eels, Jeff Farris, Evan Fish, Leslie Gooch, Mike Grafe, Robert Graham, Camille Henry, Stephen Hope, Alan Hughes, Marek Krause, Jesper Kumberg, Robert Lawlaw, Adrian Loon, Liz Lynch, Murray Meikle, Yusuf Murrah, Amy Parkinson, Mark Reed, Jamie Reimer, Michael Sutcliffe, Steve Swift, Mark Thomas, Nigel Waller, John Wedemeyer, Lucy Verbitsky, and Martin Whitley. And that is all for now. I'll see you next time.